Back. We are back.
Back with number 5. So you want to lead us off today? I know
Yeah.
you said you have something you might want to read off to us. So.
Yeah, I do. So today I'd like to discuss UFOs.
Yeah.
And extra life, etc.
Sweet.
So in doing some of the research I did, and I think I said this last time, I made a comment when we were talking, because I think it did come up last time, about aliens or alien life or extraterrestrial life. And I was like, well, if I was a person who said, if it wasn't in the Bible, therefore it must not exist, right? So I come across a passage in the Bible, and I'm going to read it, and then we'll discuss what it may or may not mean. So this is the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And I apologize if I struggle because this is very tiny writing. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in these days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children with them. They bore children to them.
Okay.
These were the mighty men who were of old, the men renowned. So the term, in doing some further research, the term Nephilim can be interpreted a couple of ways. I guess in a Hebrew translation, it is a reference to a spiritual being.
Right.
And in the Greek translation, it is translated, let me back up. In the Hebrew translation, spiritual being, but also from an origin part of the word is fallen,
Okay.
or fall from. So a lot of people have interpreted that as fallen angels, right?
Right.
Angels who have fallen from heaven, cast out, kind of like Lucifer, etc. So in the Greek translation, it is translated as giant.
Okay.
So it kind of led me down this path of thinking, is this maybe an origin story of aliens? Were these beings, I mean, the Bible specifically says that they were on the earth and at that time and afterward.
Right.
And they also apparently impregnated women and had children with them, women of the earth. So are these people were these beings extraterrestrial life, but just not the way we're used to thinking of it as time had, especially from the 50s or so, when Area 51 became a thing and all the movies were made with aliens as a little green man. They got these, big head, skinny body, all that, fly around in a spaceship, like the science fiction version of an alien or extraterrestrial. It certainly made me wonder, and there's two sides to this. There's this the spiritual being, extraterrestrial side of it, and then there's also this translation of that word meaning giant.
Yeah, which is also crazy because in Norse mythology, Valheim is the realm of the giants.
Well, there you go.
That's another one.
So that's not coincidental that the term is
in
very
their
similar.
mythology, like at least Loki in Norse mythology was half a giant because the giant mated with his mother. So there's that too.
So So I think for the purpose of this conversation, I think it certainly is curious reference being made to these beings that were not of the earth, and that I think leads us to how things then have changed, or maybe not changed. We talked a little bit last time about ancient drawings that have been discovered of men on some sort of a flying thing.
Yeah, and ancient civilizations worshiping these bigger in those pictures.
Right.
Yeah, and like we said before, like them coming down and like showing humanity how to mate and learn architecture and all this stuff and create these like higher beings through.
Yes, I don't think it's coincidental.
I don't think it is at all.
I don't think it's coincidental, and I think regardless of how you want to translate that term.
Right.
I think they're related.
Yeah.
Giants. And it also, I think, ties into the Greek mythology, which we talked about with the gods that came down and
Yeah.
with.
Yeah, like you hear
people
about
that
all
are-
these ancient heroes that were like half god, like Hercules
Yes.
and Achilles and all
Exactly.
these people that were like these, not just, they weren't just regular humans. They were these heroic figures in
Yeah.
mythology that were something from a god or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
So I think it's interesting. Another interesting part, and then we'll fast forward into the whole world of the UFO stuff. But that term Nephilim is only used twice in the Bible. That was one verse that it was used in, and it's also used in another Old Testament book, and I think it's Numbers.
Okay.
And that's it. Twice that
Interesting.
term is used. But it's interesting that was in Old Testament
Yeah.
writings. So
That's pretty insane.
yeah,
Yeah, and if you want to move on to UFOs, the biggest thing that I find crazy is like, especially in current times right now, like, and I think this was probably, it was either last year or it was recent, but how the government is just all of a sudden like, why are we
Yeah.
just now officially hearing
Yeah.
statements from the government?
all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna let the government talk about the hidden files and about UFOs
Yeah.
and extraterrestrial life.
And is it a way of like, is humanity ready to just hear this? Are we all of a sudden just at a place in our time that we can just accept that kind of information and knowledge, or is it just to cover up something else? I don't.
Good point.
You know.
I don't know. I don't know. But it is interesting that because all of these sightings were happening, the Area 51 stuff, people seeing lights in the sky, flying saucers, cigar-shaped vessels,
Right.
people were reporting these things, for a long time,
And
decades.
it's always been kind of swept under the rug.
And the government basically is like, we even had Air Force pilots, saying, hey, we were flying along at, 30,000 feet at whatever speed. And I look out to my left and there's one of these flying saucers like flying right next to me,
Yeah.
and the government suppressed that kind of thing from being released to the public.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was a story, I don't know if this was recent too, but I think there was a training exercise going on with some like military grade
Probably.
jets or whatever.
Probably.
And one had been impacted or crashed into by a UFO or UAP. And they ended up, I think they covered that story up too.
Okay.
But where this unidentified object, and you know how close when they fly in formation, they're very close.
Yes.
This thing supposedly flew in between and hit the one plane and crashed, and they said it was a training accident. But then you see all like at those conferences where those few military and those airspace people came out and were I don't know if they were whistleblowing or what, but they were releasing information, and I mean, I don't know how much further it went from that, but it's coming out now though, and I feel like we kind of knew it was always there.
And I think I think we did too. But I think the interesting thing, tying it back to what we discussed at the beginning of this episode, with some references to that potentially this extraterrestrial life going back as far as the Old Testament. Obviously, it's been going on since whenever, and I guess I would say with the Area 51 stuff was probably when it really came into the consciousness of the general public.
Yeah.
Like really where it was sort of like, you're not crazy if you say you saw a flying saucer.
Yeah. It's just if most of the, and then, you get so many people reporting it, and then people start making stuff up, and
exactly.
abductions, sightings, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Depending on the country, some countries take it more seriously than others.
Right.
Which one thing I want to get into is Brazil is a country who, they have a government program that actively tracks UFO sightings and activity.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they've had quite a bit of activity.
They have
in Brazil.
Yes.
From what I understand.
Yeah. And because there's actually this famous story. It's called the night of the UFOs. It happened in I think the 80s, 86 or something.
Yeah, and there was like a whole like some grainy video out there.
Yeah,
of this
there
thing,
is.
right? There's like bunches of them.
Yes.
In the sky. Right?
So yeah, and somewhere and the crazy thing is, most of their sightings are reported by military people, not just
not
civilians.
just general,
Yeah.
not just the general public. Yeah.
So in this
and
scenario,
I think that gives that credibility, right?
Right.
Wouldn't you?
yeah,
I
people
guess
tracking the aerospace and
Yeah.
like like that night, for example, they reported 3 red lights floating over this airport where planes were flying in and out. And then once the military reported it, more people started reporting it. And then supposedly, when they tried to put their own air traffic in there to investigate, these UFOs were just disappearing and ending up 20 miles somewhere else in Brazil, and they were being reported from those areas too. And this happened for a little while, but what's crazy about it is I do have a really good story around this if you want to hear it.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody wants to hear it.
So right around the same time when these UFO sightings were happening in Brazil in the 80s, there was this boy, Francisco, who was coming home from school, just doing his everyday thing, going to the river to play with bugs and catch bugs and stuff, just like any other kid would. And he caught this bug in a container, and he happened to look across the river, and he saw this group of vultures, which to him, he's like, oh, there's a dead animal over there, whatever. So, but because he didn't go home yet, he knew he'd get in trouble if he came home soaking wet, and because he's not supposed to be there. This is some place he sees on the way home from school. And so he starts throwing rocks over on the other side of the creek, and the vultures don't take any notice to it. Well, then he starts really irritating them and finally gets them to fly away. Well, from where he can visibly see that spot, there's a dead corpse there. He doesn't know if it's an animal, it's a person, can't tell, but it doesn't have fur, anything like that. He runs home and tells his mom, and immediately within an hour or so, police and crime scene, all this stuff, everybody's there, And so this place is fully shut down. Well, around this time in Brazil, there was a lot of gang activity, a lot of murders constantly, all the time. And with local authority, they were usually pretty good about keeping people in the loop on what was going on with all this kind of stuff. Well, in this specific scenario, they were keeping it pretty hush. They weren't telling everybody. They were trying to keep everybody back. They wouldn't let anybody in the area. It was all crossed off. So, long story short, they basically covered this thing up and cleaned it up by the next morning. Like, people were like, "Oh, we'll hear it about it on the news. Local newspaper, all this stuff. There's going to be stories about it." Not a single thing was reported after the initial investigation. So, and then what's crazy is, I think it was in 1990, some whistleblower in the Brazilian government released a bunch of information, autopsy reports, photographs from this crime scene.
Okay.
And this is the craziest thing, and I'm not going to show pictures of this because they're pretty graphic. If you want to look them up, you can. But so they did find a person, and originally when they did close this report out, they said it was a local fisherman who was drunk and he drank himself to death, and no one thought anything of it. So this person was found with
pardon me.
Go ahead.
This was confirmed to be a human corpse.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, human corpse, middle-aged man. And these weren't just like some cut up fleshy holes he had on him. These were like with perfect precision, and like you had to have been trained to use this kind of stuff, but he had perfect circular holes on both sides of his chest. He had one right over his belly button where it would have been, and then one in his groin. And they found that most of his insides were completely like vacuumed out, which is insane.
Wow.
He was missing, and then he was missing his lower jaw, missing an eye, missing an ear.
Huh.
And these were confirmed photos from the person that leaked this stuff.
Okay.
From this incident. So, and I think that's what's crazy is something that just, what do you want to call it? It's just so
bizarre,
I guess. Yeah, is the word.
I mean, I could see if the body had been found with some like precision cuts. You could always argue a doctor,
right?
somebody that
Yeah.
a surgeon that had experience that could do that.
Sure.
But when you say that the insides of the person were essentially vacuumed out,
Yeah.
that changes the game.
And it gets crazier.
Because why do you, okay.
So, about a year or two prior to this incident happening, while this Night of the UFOs was happening, somewhere around this time in multiple parts of Brazil, there were multiple sightings that had repeat UFO sightings, and they were all pretty close together. Well, local farmers started reporting that a lot of their cattle were just dying randomly, and they didn't know what it was. They investigated that too. If it was how they were feeding them, if it was something, if there was like a local
Chupacabra.
something. But the crazy thing about this situation is the cows were found the exact same way. They had holes throughout their body, perfect circular holes, and intestines completely missing, bottom of the jaw gone. Just
I
then
remember hearing, and I remember something like this happening here in the United States too, with cattle, livestock. Very similar situation. I don't remember where. It was. I want to say, maybe like a pretty remote area, maybe like a Utah or something like that. Very, very similar type of thing.
Yeah, and then in the autopsy report, this is how they found the cause of death, which is kind of crazy. So there's a nerve in your body called the vagus nerve. It's like it's like one of the main nerves in the body. It also like controls your automatic functions like digestion, heart beat, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like your flight or fight nerve.
Okay.
So like when you're in a situation where you're being harmed or you have to defend yourself, that nerve will shut off all your automatic functions to help yourself survive in that situation. Well, with this person having all these kind of incisions and injuries and all this kind of stuff, it's reported the way that the nerve looked upon the autopsy was that the body was in so much pain that the vagus nerve actually turned off the heart and killed the body.
Really?
Yeah. So basically, like, he was in so much pain that his vagus nerve,
his body essentially just
killed
down.
itself. Yeah, shut it down.
Shut
Yeah.
down. Like the shock
Right.
that he was experiencing was so great.
Yeah.
That the body just said, "No, we're done." I'm
And
done.
and I've looked
That
up the
is
photos.
crazy.
It is very
Gruesome.
bizarre and gross.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that was one of the many stories I've read recently that were just so mind-boggling.
So was the story you told about the cattle that was also in Brazil?
Yes, that was the
Okay.
same area.
Same general area.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not coincidental.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't think. Come on. I mean, you could say, like I said, you could a human being found like that. I suppose you could say it's a one-off weird thing. Okay, right?
But I feel like they would have found someone if there really was, if it was a person.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think it's also very interesting that it was covered up. It was never reported on, which was the norm that they would report on
Right.
stuff like that. Like, hey, we found a man.
But then once it becomes paranormal and extraterrestrial, it's like nobody wants to have their hands on it, and they just push it into this little compartment where it's never going to get touched again, and then we just move on.
Well, it's interesting. When you talk about things just being essentially covered up, right? I came across a thing, a place called Sycamore Knoll. It's 6 miles off the coast of California near Malibu. A place called Point Dume, Dume. Maybe I may not be pronouncing that correctly. Where there was a lot of speculation that there was like an underwater UFO base.
Okay.
You can Google this and see the pictures of what this looked like with using Google Earth. So it's just an odd looking, almost like there's like a plateau looking thing that you could see was underwater because of the way because of like the topography of the Google Earth stuff, right? You could tell it was sort of like rectangular shaped, but it was raised up off of the floor of the ocean, right? And it was also an area that a lot of UFO activity had been reported, sightings, etc. Then just in April or May of this year, it was wiped off of Google Earth.
No way.
And I actually went on Google Earth just to see, and it's like it's all blurry now.
Oh my gosh.
So that's and not that, and that isn't the only story of underwater activity. There's a place in Mexico, Guadalupe Island, I think it's called. Same type of thing. People were reporting seeing UFOs entering the water and exiting the water. Like they were seeing this happen, and so lots of activity. And I believe they sent the military, like the Navy, out there to sort of check it out. And of course, we don't know the results of the investigation.
It's funny because in any other scenario, we get all the details. We get all
Too much.
The gruesome details. We get all the specifics, everything. But when it comes to stuff like this, why do we hide it?
That's a really good question.
Because it can't be a coincidence every time something like this happens, we don't really hear about it.
Wait,
and then we hear about it all these years later because of people that dug into it. Or
I don't believe it's coincidental at all that we don't hear about it. But I think the big question is, why is that happening?
Right.
Why are the powers that be, the authorities, or whoever the ones are that make those decisions, saying essentially, we can't let the public know that there's UFOs? Everybody, like you said, I think it's maybe not with everyone, but I think it's somewhat generally accepted that there is some, I think a lot of people believe that there is something going on when it comes to UFOs and or extraterrestrial activity. In some way, shape, or form, I think people kind of, and obviously there's plenty of people who have had their own personal experiences. I have not, but there are people who have. You're not going to tell them it doesn't exist.
It's just like anything else. Like I know plenty of people who have experienced paranormal activity,
right?
Anything religious related have experienced things like it's.
Oh yeah.
You can't sit there and tell any of those people they didn't experience that because how would you know? That's the other thing too, is a lot of the times when this stuff happens, there's almost no witness. That's except for maybe the one person. Yeah, the one person.
Well, it's like I think we touched on this. The movie Fire in the Sky.
Yeah,
that came out in I don't remember when it came out. Late 90s, I think. Retelling the story of the guy who was abducted,
right, and
returned to Earth, but this is a guy that was ridiculed for forever after that. Like there's no way this could have happened to you. And of course, there was nobody that saw it.
That wasn't the Travis Walton story, was it? Is that the same guy?
It may be,
because that was a story
hold on.
It's like one of the most known.
It may be
things ever happen.
Let me see.
Like one of the most. What do you call it? Like had the most information that was valid for a UFO sighting because it was like a full investigation.
Yeah, Travis Walton.
Okay, yeah. So do you know about Travis Walton?
Yeah.
I mean, you watched the movie.
I've seen the movie and I looked into the story. Yeah.
Yeah. So any of you who don't know the story about Travis Walton, I don't know exactly. It was somewhere in the Midwest, I think it took place.
Yes, he was with a group of his.
Yeah, so him and his buddies, they were some younger guys. This took place in, I think, the mid-70s, 75.
1975.
75,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
They were a private group of loggers who went around accepting contracts, and they weren't some big company. They had like chainsaws and axes and their own little vehicle. They were no big
Yeah, it wasn't some big,
operation.
it wasn't a big operation. Right?
So, and Travis was like kind of like the guy who kind of stood out. He'd be the one, like, I think he jumped out of their car once and like chased a bear off the road and chased him into the woods. He's just kind of the crazy fun guy that kind of wasn't afraid to do anything, They took this contract up in the mountains or in the woods this one time and doing the normal thing, cutting down their trees and they move on from that. And they were all in the woods and it was later and they could see this light coming down into the forest, and they were trying to figure out if it was the moon or if it was like a forest fire or something. And well, they went after and they investigated because Travis was, he had to know. So they go look for it and they end up in this open area of the woods, and there's this massive just UFO, I guess, but this massive ship just hovering in the middle of the woods, and they're all standing there, and Travis got a little bit closer than everyone else, and he essentially got zapped by it and disappeared. They couldn't find him. Everyone was so freaked out they just ran, and ran back to the car, got in, started driving. They just assumed that their friend was dead at this point because of what happened. You know, they're all trying to figure out what they need to do. One of the guys in the car was like, we need to call someone. We got to tell somebody what happened. So
Right.
the most collective person, they got to a payphone. They called the local authorities. They said, hey, our friend went missing. Something happened. I think it'd be better if you just come here and we explain it to you. It'll being in person will do more justice, you know. So the local sheriffs show up. They talk to the guys, and they don't come out right away and say that, you know, our friend was abducted by
We
an
saw
alien.
UFO.
Yeah, because then you're going to assume you guys are drunk or high or something's going on. But then the other friend was like, our friend was attacked or abducted by a UFO. The cops are like, come on, like, really? So they're like, well, we're going to have to search your vehicle, make sure you guys aren't under the influence or anything, drugs, alcohol, that kind of stuff. They found nothing in the van. Everybody was good. So they take him back for a statement. And then they get a local search party together to try and find Travis. And already this isn't looking good for the three guys. You're a group of guys out in the middle of the woods. Your friend disappears, and there's no evidence.
And you're claiming that he was abducted by
yeah,
aliens.
you already sound insane.
Right.
Like, and what's crazy, it sounds like a hoax, but it sounds like a bad hoax that you're trying to cover up a murder that you might have committed.
Exactly.
And
It's-
that's where
it's sketchy at best.
It's sketchy. And it's like, well, these guys can't be that stupid to come up with that's their story.
Yeah.
So they have this big search party. They're looking. One of the guys notices that there's these few guys in these red jackets with like these like scanners, like radiation scanners.
Yeah.
They're scanning the area, and they're really interested because they want to know. They would just want to solve the situation. So they go up and ask one of the guys, like, hey, like, did you find anything? If you want, you can scan our equipment. Like, our helmets were there. Like, you could scan our hard hats, all that kind of stuff. Because the clothes they'd worn were back at their house because this was the next day. So the guy scans the one helmet, and it just goes all the way up.
Yeah.
And he looks at his partner, doesn't say anything, and then they scan a couple other pieces of equipment, and then they just turn around and leave. They wouldn't give the guys any explanation at all. What's really bizarre about this story now is at this point, you know, the local authorities are not on the side of these guys. They're not friendly. They're not friends.
Right.
But one of them walks up to the sheriff and he said, hey, who were those guys that were just here? Were they like part of some paranormal? What are they here for? And nobody, not the police, not anyone there investigating this, saw these people that was scanning their equipment. Nobody has any record that group
Those
of people was
were
there. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
And so like the sheriff's like, you know, you guys are facing, you know,
Life in prison.
right. You're going to have, you know,
You're going to have to come up with a better story.
because unfortunately at this point in real life, like if you don't have any kind of story or evidence, this is just how it's going to go until it's revealed, you know?
Right.
So
right.
these guys try to move on. And then I think it's maybe 5 days later, Travis he wakes up
Yeah.
just in the same place.
He's in the woods or wherever he was taken. Yeah.
Totally dehydrated, just like
That looks like utter shit.
not in a good place.
Right.
He waddles his way back into town and finds a phone, and people notice him. Like, this is a guy that's been missing. He's been all over the news.
Supposedly, yeah. Everybody thought he had been murdered. He's dead. Right.
And so they take him in for questioning. They let him get recovered. The next couple of days, he's explaining to them everything that he remembers up until that point that he was zapped or abducted or whatever it was.
Right.
And I think at that point it was just like they let his friends go. They didn't bother them anymore. And then Travis they all kind of went their separate ways and moved on. But what's really sad about this story is all of their lives were kind of ruined at this point. One of them, I know their parents disowned them.
Yeah.
I know Travis went through a lot of really bad stuff the rest of his life. Nobody was taken seriously anymore.
So, okay, question for you. In the movie version of this.
Yeah, I don't remember the movie too much.
Okay. But in the movie version, there are scenes, and I don't recall, did he share with people, with the authorities when he came back, that he had been tested
Yes.
on? Okay, I thought so.
He did report that, yeah.
Because that all of those things were in the movie of him.
Okay, yeah,
like him seeing these alien beings and them conducting these tests.
He was being operated on a table.
Operated on.
And I think
crazy
what
stuff
else
like that.
was
Yeah.
he came to while he was being operated on,
Yes.
and
Right.
he was he tried like fighting back. He like grabbed the first thing he could find to like keep these people away from him. But what's crazy was he saw someone, an astronaut, who looked human,
I remember
and
that now.
he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, thank God! Like, where are we? Like, we got to get back." And supposedly, this astronaut was just like, wasn't there. Like, he was looking in, like, just dead space, just not looking at anything, wouldn't
Yeah.
react to anything, and wouldn't talk to Travis. But I think that's how he found his way back, though. And I don't know the whole story on that part,
I don't
but
either.
I
I
do
don't
remember
either.
him waking up, going through that, talking to this astronaut, and then ultimately waking up back in that little valley in the woods.
Yeah. So this happened in 1975, so 50 years ago. Interesting stuff. Well, I think one of the curious things to me about that whole story, and I'm not discounting it.
Me either.
I'm not saying that at all. I just think it's very interesting that he heard these experiments being conducted on him.
Yeah, but he also couldn't remember like how he ended up there.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that's what's curious to me is that he remembered everything before he got like electrified or whatever, and then they take him. He remembers certain experiments being conducted on him and so on and so forth. Yes, there was a movie at one time. I don't remember the movie, but like the whole idea was essentially like these aliens could take you, do these experiments, right? And then like essentially like Men in Black,
Right.
You know, like wipe your brain, like
Yeah.
you don't remember anything.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
and they just drop you off back at home, and you're like nothing ever happened.
Well, and that's what makes me wonder about the Brazilian story is like,
Right.
So all these cattle were being experimented on, basically. I mean,
apparently,
if they're
yeah.
all having the same kind of injuries, missing intestines, all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
they're obviously studying these animals.
Correct.
And then they finally study a human being,
Right.
and they just drop the body on the side of a river.
Which is weird,
You
but
know?
but that's what they did to the cattle.
Right.
It's the same. Like it just goes. Yeah. It didn't. That human being had no greater value to them than the cattle did.
Right, yeah.
Right. It's just like this is something
Just another creature from this planet.
from
Yeah,
Earth. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. So you mentioned in the Travis Walton story the guys that were, I guess, testing radiation or whatever.
Yeah, right.
What do they call that? A gigameter? Or
Yeah,
whatever?
something like that.
Are you familiar with Skinwalker Ranch?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, scary stuff.
Weird.
Very weird.
And there's a show out there. It's had couple 3 seasons, I think.
I'll
It's
have to
really
check it
interesting
out.
stuff. So,
I've always like skimmed over it. I've never watched it.
but like a lot of that type of activity, like so they'd see like an object in the sky, like hovering or whatever, and then they had cameras set up all around. This is like huge property. I don't remember how many thousands of acres this are contained in this ranch, but when they go to certain parts of that property, and those kinds of things would happen, like their phones wouldn't have any, they'd have no signal, or
Right.
it would be like doing like flashing weird stuff
yeah.
on the screen,
Right. It's like interrupting its signal.
Yeah, and there was an outbuilding there, same kind of thing. Like they would go to and check it out, and the gigameter thing was just going off the charts. Phones are going crazy, cameras aren't working, lights going out or flashing. Yeah,
Wow.
great. Like so, again, I like there are reports, and we've just are just touching on a couple,
Yeah, I mean, there's probably
But-
thousands.
but there's consistency in certain things in these reports,
Right.
which makes it far more credible to me. You know, it'd be one thing if there were like let's just say 1,000 for the sake of easy math, 1,000 stories out there, but they were all different,
Right.
like totally different. You would go,
Yeah.
okay, but now you're here, and you're getting reports from different parts of the world, and there are consistencies. You know, the radiation check thing, these animals and human being having these experiments done on it. It's like, so when there's consistency there, for me anyway, it brings some credibility to it, where it's not as far-fetched.
Right.
You can't tell me that like some little kid in Brazil like made that up.
Yeah. No, I mean, come on.
And then
And he essentially didn't really.
He didn't even know-
He just found the
he
body.
didn't even know what he was walking up on, right?
Yeah.
And then you find animals that have the exact same types of things done to them.
With tools that we've never seen before. Like
yeah, apparently.
Like I know they tried to even match up the shape because they were perfect circle.
Right.
Like almost like circular punched holes.
Yeah.
in these bodies.
Yeah.
And they couldn't find anything
That could do it.
that we have made that could do
they
something like that.
Yeah, it's so not coincidental.
No.
At all.
I wanted to bring up, I just remember, I just jogged a memory, and I'm not saying that this was a UFO sighting or anything, but there was one time Alexis and I were out on a walk. We like to take pretty late walks around our neighborhood or take bike rides. And I think this particular night we were riding our bikes, and we were coming back up on the main road that goes back to our street. And there was never anybody out this late because, I mean, we went late. Everybody's asleep at this point. It's like 11 o'clock, midnight, you know.
Yeah.
And we live in a pretty safe neighborhood. But down the street, like, so say you're riding down this main road, and then there's an intersection of another street that's going this way. We saw this light, and it was just, like, bouncing like this, but it was going across the road. And it was just, like, doing this back and forth, and it went...
Was it, like, above the
ground?
Level?
Yes,
Above the ground.
yes.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And it went left, and then... We weren't, like, I think she was ahead of me when this was happening, but we both saw it.
Okay.
And when we stopped on Tyler Drive, and she's like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what was that?" And she's like, "I don't know, but it freaked me out." And I was like, "I didn't see anybody, but it was a light, you know?" And it was
Weird.
just like, and it wasn't just a light going like this or doing this. It was just doing this weird jumping up and down, almost like if something was running, I guess. Like if there was a light on something.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You know, I don't know, but it was very strange. That was a couple years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. I have not had any personal experience with UFOs. I know a couple people who have claimed to have seen something in the sky. Yeah. Again, I think it's, I don't think it's coincidental that there is consistency out there and among these stories. And I think you said this last time. You made a comment, something along the lines of, you're naive in today's day and age if you don't think that there's something else out there. Right. Something along those lines. And I think that that's true. I think it's true that you kind of...
I feel like you have to be really hard-headed.
The universe, and you brought this up, and I think it's worthwhile circling back to this, is the vastness of the universe that we know, right? And the Bible talks about God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens.
Yeah.
Plural. So what we have discovered could only be scratching the surface of what's out there.
Right.
So is it far-fetched to think that there are other beings that we haven't even discovered? Yeah, somehow they've decided that they want to come here.
Yeah. I mean, and just think about the Milky Way galaxy. We're one small planet in that little galaxy out of, 9 planets?
Yeah. If you count
Pluto.
But whatever's not.
I don't even know if it's still a planet or not. Maybe it is a planet again. I don't know.
Oh, is it back to being a planet? Okay, that's good. I remember when I first heard that, I was like, what?
How is it not a planet?
I don't even remember what it was being called, but whatever.
If you know, let us know.
Yeah.
Is Pluto a planet?
Yeah.
Like, and we're one of the smaller planets, and it's like out of our one little galaxy, and there's trillions of other galaxies like ours, just everywhere, and for a forever expanding universe.
And the stuff that we've discovered so far up until now, the stuff that we have discovered, and we're discovering new things all the time.
All the time.
We talked about the underwater idea of UFOs,
yes, right?
And then I think we touched on this last time, these almost alien-looking life forms that are being discovered at great depths in the ocean.
In the ocean, yeah.
It's I don't know. It just really makes you think, and it boggles my mind sometimes to think about how vast the universe is.
I know
what could be out there.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it really makes you wonder, where NASA is, and all of the space programs around the world are just forever researching and studying everything that they possibly can, creating new technology to advance our research beyond our atmosphere. Yeah. And, even like Elon Musk and stuff, like everybody trying to find ways to go beyond our planet and learn things and essentially be able to maybe inhabit another planet someday. Like,
Or are there things out there that can make life better here?
sure, exactly.
I don't know, but yeah.
And I think that's one thing, like curiosity about humanity is as we've expanded and advanced in technology is like we're looking up and we're so curious, just as curious beings in general, to want to know what's beyond what we have.
And I think the frustrating thing for me is that for a long time, people, the naysayers, were just simply saying, "Well, life can't be supported on wherever, Mercury or Saturn," and it was like, okay, but so you're saying because Earth is the only planet that can sustain life as we know it,
Right.
right, within our galaxy, within our solar system. Let me make it even shrink it down.
Yeah, right.
Therefore, it's not possible that there's anything else out there.
Yeah, how does that
That it just gets dismissed that easily because, well,
just because we couldn't survive
you
on that
know
planet?
that a person, their plants can't grow on Jupiter. What are you, a dumbass? Well, I'm not saying it's just within our 9-planet solar system.
Right.
You just want to go, well, if life can't survive on those, then there's no way that there could be aliens. Where are they living?
And that's the thing,
Stuff
like other
that. And it's
beings could, there's like, and like that's the other crazy, like with how much sci-fi we have access to now, it's like you learn about all these things through fiction about other beings and other like fake civilizations and things, all this stuff. But
Yeah.
how those people live and survive on other planets because they're just different beings. Like,
Yeah. Maybe they don't require the same levels of oxygen that
yeah,
human
and their
does.
gravity's different.
The gravity's different. The temperature is different. The
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Certain levels of radiation.
I mean, it's just like it just goes back to the thing at the outset of the show where we talked about, the Nephilim, and are they extraterrestrial beings, spiritual, whatever, angels, call them what you want. Their frame of reference at that time when the Bible was being recorded is not the same as ours is today.
Right.
But yet somehow it was recorded that there were some different beings and they just came out of the sky.
Yeah.
Well, okay, maybe, but there's more to it.
Yeah.
It's when it's a human recording that and going, well, I see this thing come out of the sky. I don't know what it is or where it came from. Yeah, it kind of looks human and it's really big.
Right.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah. There was another incident where, and I can't remember where this took place, but this older lady, her name was Betty something, but she had I don't know if it was some younger boy she was looking after. I don't think he had a mother anymore or something, but
Okay.
this boy, and then I believe it was her younger friend or sister, some sort of relation. 3 of them having dinner at a truck stop, just normal Sunday night doing their thing. And they're driving back in their car, and they come to a stop in the middle of the road. And this is at night, and there's this like almost diamond-looking figure just floating in the middle of the road,
A figure?
like almost like a ship,
Okay.
just very very narrow and almost vertical, I guess.
Okay.
And they stop because at first they just don't know what's happening, so they're kind of frozen, and it's making all this noise, and it's like every so often letting out this like burst of fire and flame out of the bottom and like burning the road. And so at first they're scared, but then they're curious because they don't know what it is. It's not doing anything except for that. So they both get out of the car to look at it, and then the boy's scared. He's in the car. Betty goes back and she's like, "It's gonna be okay. We're just gonna check it out." And, it's just staying there. It's not doing anything at all. And so Betty decides to get back in the car with the boy. Well, the other girl is standing out there just watching what's happening. Eventually, 3 or 4 military like choppers surround this thing, and then so they immediately, Betty's like, "Oh, this is just some kind of new military thing. Like this is just some kind of like training exercise, something like that with some military equipment." Mm-hmm. So they don't think anything of it, and then it's just gone. It all flies away. The choppers fly away. They drive home. They don't even speak of it at this point.
Yeah.
She goes home. Her and the boy go home, and then later on this night, her and the boy start to not feel very well. So they both go to bed. She puts him to bed. And then in the middle of the night, they both wake up and they're just both vomiting. Every kind of sickness you could have. Just like diarrhea, vomiting, sick. So throughout, they get through the night after just being, and and at first they're like, oh, we ate something bad at the truck stop. You know,
Makes sense.
it's very valid. It could happen. It could happen to any of us.
100%.
But then the next morning, Betty gets up and goes in the bathroom and finds that all of her skin is like red and blistered, like on her face, on her arms, and everything. And then she goes to check on the boy, and he's got the same problem. He's got blistering skin, redness on his face, everything, and still not feeling well. So they go to the doctors. They get checked out, everything. And then at this point, she's like, I haven't heard from what's her face. I don't know her name.
Her close friend, what's her face?
Yeah. So she can't get a hold of her. And she was outside exposed much longer than they were because they went back in the car.
Yeah.
It turns out that they all ended up having radiation poisoning from this scenario. And turns out over the years, it got so bad that both the women actually ended up with cancer due to radiation. And they sued the government. They did all this stuff happened with this after that. And unfortunately, I think it was in the early 2000s or so, they both passed away. And this boy, who's probably around my age now or a little older, he is still now investigating and trying to figure out what really happened that night.
You ever see the movie Close Encounters?
No.
You should watch it. So there's a part in the movie in the beginning, same kind of thing happens.
Okay.
Similar. This guy driving in his truck, he gets to a railroad crossing. And all of a sudden, like, there's no train coming, but the thing goes down.
Okay.
Lights are on, like
Right.
a train's coming.
Yeah.
Radio's whacking out in his truck. Lights are flashing. And all of a sudden, he sees this big, bright light. And it's, like, hovering there. And it's like, if I remember correctly, it's getting windy and stuff. And so he decides, like, I'm going to, so he starts moving it. He goes, same thing. I'm going to follow it, right? So
Right.
he's following it around. And long story short, same thing happens. Like he has like the side of his face because he puts the window down in his truck, so it would have been like the driver's side. He like puts the window down and this lights out here, and it same thing. Like his whole face is like sunburned like 1,000 times, right?
Oof.
It's like so very similar kind of story. I mean, I know it's a movie, but
but
is it
still.
a movie? I mean, yes, it's
Yeah.
a movie, but is it entirely based on
a true
fiction?
story.
Same kind of thing.
And like you said, all these things start to sound kind of consistent. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all very similar in a way.
Yeah, yeah. So that movie, Close Encounters and of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg movie, I believe.
I'm going to need to check that out and
Yeah.
watch Fire in the Sky.
So there's like supposedly the third kind of encounters. Like I guess like the first phase is like you see something.
Right.
Second phase is I don't remember. Third phase is like you see the alien people.
Right.
And then there was a movie that came out in the early 2000s called I think it was called the Fourth Kind.
That sounds really familiar.
And that was more of an abduction, like personal interaction with the extraterrestrial being.
Okay.
Yeah, you should watch Close Encounters. I think you would be.
Yeah, I need
think
to watch
you'd like
that.
it.
I
mean,
can't
it's
believe
from-
I haven't seen it.
It's from like the late 70s, early 80s. Richard
Yeah.
Dreyfuss was in it, and
Nice.
so he was like one of the main characters. But yeah, some like really crazy stuff. Like there's a part of that where this woman and her son, it's like middle of the night, they're sleeping or whatever, and all of a sudden, like the little boy gets out of bed, like the refrigerator's opening and stuff's like falling out of the refrigerator and all this stuff, and then there's like the front door opens and there's like these lights
Yeah.
like hovering in their yard.
Kind of reminds me of the movie Signs.
Yeah,
That's another one that's like kind of more on the realistic side.
yeah. And they're standing there. By this time, the woman is like, she wakes up, she comes down, and there's like looking out, and there's all these lights, like big, super bright lights, like hovering and moving around, and then you should watch it. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
But I love hearing that, like some of these they're stories that
Yeah.
people from personal experiences.
Right,
It's really
yeah.
cool.
And it kind of makes me want to dive into it more. And like, I want to, even now, there's got to be more modern stories, I'm sure, at this point.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
That we
It's-
just don't know about.
I think it's one of those things where unless you're probably unless you're like interested in it, it's not hitting the mainstream media because they've got other stupid
Right.
shit to talk about.
Yeah.
So it's far more important to them than to talk about UFOs, because it's like, yeah, whatever.
Right. And I was going to ask you, and you guys can chime in on this too, but I don't know, because this is another topic like we talked last week. It's such a vast topic that I feel like we could probably make this an episodic thing every once in a while.
Yeah.
And like come back to UFO, space, aliens, civilizations, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I want to know more. I want to hear more stories. I want to hear if any of you have any
Yeah.
close
Absolutely.
encounters or
Whatever.
anything like that, because it's all very interesting, and I feel like the more there's more conversation around it, the more it can get pushed out there, because like you said, in the mainstream media, you're not going to hear about this stuff all the time. It's just not going to happen, and it's just another one of those things I feel like we need to talk about more, just like with the paranormal stuff. I mean, like that, I think it's more touched on than UFOs and stuff, but
Yeah, I guess it does. Maybe, I don't know.
that'd be something I'd like to talk about.
No, I would like to talk about that. I have some personal experience in that world
I have a couple myself.
that I would. Yeah, that is definitely something that I would like to talk about in the future.
I feel like we know a lot of people that have some stories too
We do.
that we could maybe have on and talk about.
Yeah, that would be cool
awesome.
if we have some people that would be willing to come on here and share stories with us.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I just think that really, I think that would be interesting for you as you're watching this too, to have maybe some other faces on here,
And people with firsthand experience. on
firsthand
some stuff.
experience, and want to share that with people, rather than us telling the story for them.
Right. Yeah. And, if you like this episode, if you guys want to hear more of this kind of stuff, let us know. We will take any constructive criticism for future episode ideas.
Yeah, definitely.
So-
Definitely. If you have topics that you want us to talk about, or that you want to share, we're open to that. Again, the idea of this is we're not roping ourselves into anything in particular. It's just talking about stuff that you might talk about at any time when you're
Yeah.
hanging out with your friends or
Right.
family, so it's not anything, we don't want to be pigeonholed into any
Yeah.
particular genre or topic.
Right. I'm seeing a lot of you are clicking and watching on the videos. So if you could, please, it would help us out a ton. If you could subscribe, you'll get notified when we post our next episodes. We'll be posting some shorts on YouTube as well. And in the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see